Hi, I'm Chris Moorby. I've been in the meat industry over 40 years and I'm now a tutor at the School of Artisan Food. I'm sure you're all able to cook pork at home. What I'm going to show you are tips and techniques that will allow you to take your cooking skills to the next level. I'm going to show you how to prepare a French trimmed rack of pork. The rack of pork is taken from the loin. There are two main parts to the full loin. This is what we refer to as the rack or the best end, and this is what we refer to as the loin end. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to split the loin in two because we only want the best end for this particular cut. The tools we need are a boning knife, a bone saw and string to tie the joint at the end. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to split the loin into two, and you do this by cutting down in between the ribs. It's one clean cut, like so, and then we take our saw and saw through the backbone. So we're now left with our rack of pork that we'll further prepare. This next part is called chining. Chining simply means cutting along the backbone. And as I cut along through the ribs and remove the backbone, that's what makes it easier for carving. So taking a saw, we're going to saw along the ribs towards the backbone. This is something you probably would like to get your butcher to do, and I'm sure they will be happy to do that for you. Quite tricky. Listen for that change in noise, and we're through the rib bones. So that's the rib bones that have been sawn through, and now we've got to carefully remove these backbones. So using the tip of the knife, simply angle our knife and go along the backbone to remove it in one piece. Staying close to the bone, teasing the meat from the bone so we leave as much meat on the joint as possible. We'll see now that we're cleanly removing the backbone. Don't throw that away, that can sit in your roasting tin and you can use it as a trivet when you are roasting it off so that the joint will roast evenly. The next thing we've got to do to make all that lovely crackling is we've got to score the joint. Scoring means that we're cutting through the skin into the fat, but trying hard not to cut into the flesh. Otherwise you'll lose a lot of liquid when we come to roast it. It's easier to start in the middle of the joint, halfway along, and we simply score through that rind. Try and get them as evenly spaced as possible, trying hard not to cut it into the flesh. So this is what the scoring should look like. We should have the knife that's cut through the rind onto the fat, but not cut into the flesh. Helps with wonderful crisp crackling. The next step is to French trim it. And what you've got here is you've got the eyepiece, which is the solid piece of meat within that chop, and you've also got some belly. Now we want to trim a lot of that belly off and actually clean the rib bones for our finished dish. So what we do is cut in a line parallel to the length of the loin, cut through onto the ribs and remove this belly meat from the top of the ribs. We now need to trim the meat that lies in between the ribs. So we get the definition of the ribs. Trim that carefully, like so, all the way along. This trim can be used in casseroles, it can be used in pies. We're certainly not going to be throwing anything away. So now we're looking at the deboned and trimmed loin. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this up for cooking so that when it cooks, it's held in shape, and then you will be able to carve it much easier. We tie in between each of the ribs so that the joint begins to take shape. I'm doing a butcher's knot, but as long as you can get a knot that is nice and tight, you can use whatever method you want to. The most important thing is that the knots are quite tight so that they help during the cooking process. So once you've made the final tie in between the last rib, the French trimmed rack of pork is now finished and ready for the oven.